Didn't know I was going to be director and AV club nerd at the same time. We got it.
You're an excellent AV nerd.
Well, thank you. It's not that I have no experience in it. So I know what I'm talking about.
You ready?
Yeah.
Okay, I'd like to call to order the May 13th Board of Trustees meeting and budget presentation. First, we'll go around the room. It's Mark Kissinger, the president of the board.
Sherry Whiting, I'm the board treasurer.
Charmaine Regis-Singer, trustee and co-vice president.
Sarah Patterson, trustee.
Caroline Brancatella, trustee and secretary.
Michelle Walsh, co-vice president.
And Lisa Schoons, trustee and UHLS board member.
Jeff Kirkpatrick, library director, and on Zoom with us.
Hi, Laura DeBetta, trustee. Apologies for not being there. I'm at a conference in New Hampshire. You can't see it, but the White Mountains are behind me.
Okay, great. Thanks, everyone. We're now going to do a presentation on the 2014-2015 proposed library budget. Call Sherry, take that over.
The 24-25 budget that has been proposed represents a 4.32% increase in the levy, but that is still within the New York State mandated tax cap. Key elements of the budget include some increased personnel costs to bring part-time workers into parity with their full-time counterparts, as well as an increase in wages based on a newly negotiated 5-year contract. Additional personnel costs and health insurance, which continues to increase on an annual basis. Material spending has remained steady as we continue to balance the physical collection with e-materials. Interest rates continue to remain high, and we're trying to take advantage of that as much as we can. So the budget reflects an increase as we look for opportunities to take advantage of those rates while ensuring that our cash flow isn't disrupted. We believe this budget will allow us to continue to provide the community with the highest level of access and service, not only in the next fiscal year, but beyond.
Okay, thanks. Thanks for that. Thanks for that presentation. We'll move right into public comment. Anyone on the board want to say anything if you want to?
Actually, I have a quick question. Jeff, it says special programs, but it says increased demand for programming. Is special programs like special programs, or is it just programming? What the adjective special?
Yeah. Programs. Yeah.
Just a brief comment, Mark, that for the benefit of the public, that the increased the wage parity and the increased personnel costs that Sherry mentioned are part of the 5-year. You did reference this, but part of the 5-year contract with the union that we negotiated last year. So those are planned costs that were built into our negotiations and our plan last year.
I didn't give you a heads up that I was going to ask you this, but anyway, so the materials line stays the same, but because of the electronic materials or access and the more traditional books, there's no decrease in that. In fact, the transition is making it, we're able to provide more. Is that correct?
Well, e-materials are more expensive on a per item basis. So I think we're just, as we are coming through, post-pandemic, during the pandemic, when e-materials was like 100% of what we were circulating. We kind of got to take that year of 2020. After that, it's stabilized and just continues to be a slight shift. So for now, we just leave ourselves the flexibility to adjust that towards e-materials if we find it necessary, but we're just balancing those things as best we can right now. Yeah.
Thank you.
I just wanted to highlight that our board treasurer, Sherry, has impressively increased our interest income. We didn't have that before, and that's a $38,000 increase. So that's really great. Thanks, Sherry, for your work.
It also helps that the interest rate environment is what
Right.
control over that.
But we didn't know that was coming, and you did, and you had the foresight and invested wisely, and yeah, great.
Any other questions or comments on the budget? Okay, thank you. We'll move into public comment.
Here we are again, 5 months later, and I am continuing to be very displeased with the aptitude of this board and your inability to respond to our appeals. And had many months to do so, and we haven't heard a word. And the sanctions are based on lies, which we all know. And I wonder about your ability to really effectively run a library. And after reading your new proposals for reserving rooms in the library, 11 pages long, and I thought, well, this is absolutely ridiculous, because you're going to have to hire full-time people just to make sure to do everything that you're requiring now to reserve a space. So I'm very disappointed, and I hope that there's change soon, and that there will be a change of attitude. And honesty and integrity and ethics will be important, and that you'll make the right choices in the future, because you certainly have made some very bad and very open choices for a preference for supporting a group of very loud bullying people as opposed to supporting free speech in the library. Robert?
Thank you again. I'd like to comment on the draft meeting room policy that is on the agenda for discussion later tonight. To be specific, my concern is over the portion of the policy that controls how community groups will be able to present public events and presentations in the library. I think such events are an important part of the service which the library provides to the community. And I personally welcome those events and presentations, no matter who presents them. The policy, the draft policy, allows for groups to hold meetings that are not open to the public. Card holders can simply reserve rooms for such meetings with an attendance limit of 25. That's not the problem I have with the policy. The problem is the restriction placed on groups wishing to hold events and presentations by speakers that are intended to be open to the public. Under the draft, the only community groups able to hold such public events are affiliated entities, in effect co-sponsored by the library, and tax-exempt 501c3 charities. A community group which does not hold that tax-exempt IRS status can only hold a public event in the library with an attendance limit of 65 by obtaining sponsorship by a 501c3, which then becomes responsible for any violations of policy that might occur during the event. Why are 501c3 charities being given this special status and power over the use of the library? The draft policy provides no answers to these questions. I looked at the charter, I looked elsewhere, and I cannot find why 501(c)(3)s are being given to us. In effect, the library is turning over its responsibility for use of its rooms to outside non-public organizations. And we could expect that such organizations will be reluctant to provide sponsorship to any controversial or advocacy group, or any group proposing a controversial public presentation. 501c3, which does provide sponsorship, becomes responsible for the actions of the group and may even put its own tax-exempt status in jeopardy if it sponsors a group which then engages in the types of activities which are specifically prohibited to 501c3s under federal tax code. The proposed policy will effectively establish a mechanism to block controversial groups from having access to meeting rooms for public events. And it's going to do so by placing authority over what if such events can take place in the library into the hands of unelected and unaccountable 501c3 charities. This, I believe, violates both principles of the American Library Association as well as First Amendment requirements applicable to taxpayer-supported government bodies such as the library. The ALA Bill of Rights states that when meeting rooms are made available to the public, and they certainly don't have to be made available, but when they are, they must be available on an equitable basis, regardless of the beliefs or affiliations of groups or individuals using them. ALA guidance further states that when publicly funded libraries make meeting rooms available to the public, they, in effect, they become what are called, quote, designated public forums.
30 seconds.
As designated public forums, they are under legal interpretations indicate that libraries may not exclude such groups based on the subject matter of the meeting or beliefs of the groups. The ALA warns that policies that are perceived to restrict controversial groups' access to meeting rooms may result in legal and financial consequences to the library. I urge the board to not approve this policy in its present form. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, good evening, everyone. I'm just using these few minutes to draw the board's attention to meet and greet held in this room last week. I don't think you were all there, but some of you were. And after the speeches were made, a lady came up to my husband and accused him of making her feel unsafe. She also accused him of making her friend feel unsafe. Back in December, when he wasn't even in the country. Now the tribulations and trials you are putting Bethlehem Neighbours for Peace through, specifically, are as a result of people like this causing trouble. People like this can turn up to any meeting and cause trouble. Your draft procedures are showing that organizations holding meetings, groups, and not even organizations necessarily, would have to pay for security. So any nutter can rock up to a meeting and cause distress at that meeting. And the people holding the meeting who have no jurisdiction over who turns up, because we are supposed to be a free and open space and allow freedom of speech. But with freedom of speech comes responsibility, especially in an area such as a library, where respect is required, and tolerance, and also patience. None of this has been shown by the people who upset our meeting back in December, I think it was the 4th, and who started to upset the meeting last week, the meet and greet. In fact, one woman, at the mention of freedom of speech, sighed audibly, got up and left the room, slamming the door behind her. This is not showing tolerance or respect. And to be honest, she made me feel unsafe. Some of these people are really a problem to communities, but it's not down to people like us to take responsibility for those who are intolerant and those who do not want to allow freedom of speech. And so I'm asking the board, what's most important to you? An 11-page document which will stop groups such as ours becoming part of the library, or those who would disrupt an honest and sincere meeting. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Joe Lombardo. I'm her husband. the one who was out of the country during the pellet meeting, but was accused of harassing people during that meeting. You know, I grew up at a time when we used to say in this country that I might not agree with what you say, but I will fight like heck for your right to say it. The people that should be fighting like heck is this board, which is why I'm running for it, because that's absolutely essential. I read also the new regulations. As I've said before, and those of you who have heard me speak know, I've said that there's been in the 20 years that Bethlehem Neighbors for Peace has been using this library, there's been a continual closing down of what we can do in freedom of speech and discussion. This is a further closing down of that. As the man over here rightly said, why do you need a 401c3 to be able to have a meeting in this room? What is the justification for that? If I want to form a garden club or a bicycle club, I have to go through the onerous regulations of getting a 401c3 and all this kind of stuff that goes with it, especially if you're a group that doesn't even take dues or anything like that. There's no really financial need for it. But why is the library imposing that? Why are you asking that if you think, or if someone comes in and doesn't like our meeting, that we have to get security for it? Is this not a Bethlehem public library? Are we not Bethlehem taxpayers? Is the police station right across the street not supposed to do that? Why do you gotta hide? The reason that you want us to hire security is because you do not want us to speak. You do not want freedom of speech in this library. And that is wrong. It is just wrong. We're going through a period in this country and the world, which is very contentious.
30 seconds.
And if we're not going to be able to express it in an open way, in a peaceful way, using our words, as we tell our children, then we're in real trouble. Let's not get in that trouble. Don't pass these regulations that you're putting forward tonight.
Okay, thank you. The next order of business is the introduction of the election official. So Judy, let's say a few words.
Evening, everybody. I understand you had appointed me at your last board meeting to serve as your chief election inspector on October 1st. I've been doing this for a number of years for the school district prior to my retirement for 10 years. And we always prided ourselves on running a smooth election so we could get everybody who wanted to vote and was eligible to vote in and out as efficiently as possible. So it is our hope that we will get that accomplished for you on October 1st. And we'll have some planning meetings are already underway to make sure that that happens. And again, thank you for your appointment and your confidence in me. And I look forward to working with all of you. Any questions or?
So we're very pleased to have you appointed as election official and look forward to a productive relationship.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Before she leaves, having you up there talking reminded me of the library to consider an exit survey. Because the district does them.
Yeah, we've been talking about that.
Yeah. So just a thought, I just popped in my mind as you were standing there, so thank you.
I've always been amazed at the number of people who take the time to fill out the exit surveys, and it really provides valuable information as to why people voted for or against any of the items on a ballot. So,
And it's anonymous and it's done on the computer.
absolutely, so people can feel free to speak. And
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, the next order of business is the review of, excuse me, previous meeting minutes, pages 3 through 10 in the packet.
I'll make a motion to accept the previous meeting minutes.
I'll second it.
Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying yes or raising your hand. Seeing no opposition or, okay, that motion passes. We're moving on to the financial report, pages 11 through 20.
Thank you.
Maybe if you want to scroll to the actual report, next page after that. So expenses are tracking at about 6.7% under budget, compared to roughly 10% under budget last year. As Jeff has been saying, we're spending more money. We're really up to, pretty close to where we need to be, and we're likely to come a lot closer to the actual budget this year. Salaries and benefits are tracking about 4% under budget compared to 3.4% last year. Of note, spending on library materials is significantly higher at this time compared to last year, and it's likely to come in very close, or if not, right at budget. I just want to make a comment about investments. We had a $1.5 million CD that matured on May 6th. That generated just a little smidgen over $40,000 in interest. We looked at what we think our cash flow is going to be over the next 6 months. As you know, because tax revenues don't come in until October, we have to manage cash carefully to make sure we have enough to pay the bills. So we made the decision to, after consulting with the finance committee, to reinvest that 1.5 million with 500,000 in a 3-month CD and the remainder of $1 million in a 6-month CD. After 3 months, which will be early August, we'll take a look again. We may need those funds to pay the bills. If not, we'll reinvest it. We'll see where we are at that point in time. And the interest rate on both of those is very close, just a little bit over 5%. The Treasury bill is also due in May, at the end of May, and we will likely purchase another 6-month T-bill. We'll see what the rates are, but right now they're holding very well, right around 5%. So if we can get another 5% T-bill that we can squeeze out in this fiscal year, that'd be great. If anybody has any questions about my comments or about the report.
I would just say for the board that, as Sherry mentioned, the finance committee did have several questions that she answered with aplomb. And yeah, the committee really did work together and feel that these investments are right for the course.
Any other questions or comments? I'll take a motion on the financial report.
So moved.
Second. Okay. All the discussion, all those in favor signify by raising your hand or saying aye. Seeing no opposition, that motion passes. Moving on to the personnel report, page 21.
Here we go. I am pleased to once again have another month with no actions requested by the board, just reporting back that we filled the part-time clerical position that was open last month. That's been filled, and so we're back at full staff, which is a nice change.
That's great. Nothing to vote on.
Nothing to vote on.
Okay.
I just want to ask about the other positions that we've already authorized. So you're saying we're at full staff.
Correct.
We've authorized other positions.
Yeah.
What's the explanation?
Fair enough. So you can see the dates on those positions have been holding for so there's 3 positions, both from 21 and 22, that were that we held because of just we haven't seen the return of those physical demand for books. Again, we're not all the way back to where, and the part-time clerks at the desk are primarily focused on handling physical material. And we haven't felt that we needed to fill those positions. I'm loath to let them go because we're still everybody's sick of me talking about the pandemic, but we're still bouncing back from that a little bit. I don't know quite where this is going to go. The page position that's been held since 2023 is, as you can see, it's a 6-hour-a-week position, and it's a page position that we hold typically for our BCSD student interns when we have one of our student interns that is particularly interested in working at the library. This is a 6-hour-a-week position for us to do a kind of a trial run to see if that the position is going to work as people transition out of the program through school and into the field of work. So we hold that when we have a good applicant, we move forward with that. So that's the last position I would ever give up. I like having that in my pocket for when the situation is right. But the other three, I can't justify rehiring those positions if Phil or the folks in the circulation department were saying that we were having trouble meeting demand. If we were having lines at the circulation desk, all the page positions, well, there's one page position. Most of the page positions are filled. That's about getting the books back on the shelf. If we needed it, Phil would come to me. Probably at this point, it's been held so long, I'd come back in, check in with you, and then make sure we're still good to go, and then fill that position if it was needed.
Okay, thanks. Director's report.
All right, I'll try to be quick. Last month, we had a question about when we will be at the farmers market and if there was an opportunity for trustees who might want to go there. Here are the dates: June 1st, July 15th, August 10th, and September 7th. We'll be at the farmers market, and each of you either has available to you or you've been given what we're calling a one-pager. You can have as many of those as you want. Just facts about the project. Yep, you got it. A nice colorful sheet that you can either hand out to members of the public or use as you talk to folks about the project. And those can be printed on demand, printed up for Sarah, who went and talked to the President's Council at the school district. So it was a good exercise for us to do that. So they're there and they're available. If there are any updates, we would do that. But we brought some here for you all, and then we have them available anytime when something's planned. When we go to the farmers market, we do that from 9 to 1, and any of those times in between 9 and 1 are available. We're there. So you guys are welcome as well. We also thought that maybe evening on the green might be a good time to come and talk to people about that. And those are, those happen during the month of July, on Tuesdays during the month of July. So we have pleased to report that we have 2 construction manager submissions. Those just came in last Thursday, and we'll work get the committee put together, and then we'll be doing those interviews, and we'll get a recommendation back for that. Lots of meet the architects. We had our informal community forums back on April 7th, and then 2 more formal meetings with Ashley McGraw that were reasonably well attended. I was pleased to see so many people here, and so many of you also were here as well. So I thank you for that. More of those on the way. I think I did not anticipate quite as many engineering type questions as we received. So talked to Ashley McGraw and said it would be a good idea for us to have our MEP engineers here the next time we do one of those, because we have a lot of folks who are very interested in geothermal and what are the options that people look at for HVAC systems in the building. And an interested amateur, but I'm in no way an engineer. So it would be better to have the actual engineers here so they can do that. Towards that, we'll talk about the test bore that's proposed. We'll talk about that later on in the meeting. And then I've just been having my weekly meetings with Ashley McGraw that are going pretty well, just to make sure we're there, and a lot of good meetings with the staff about storage for these chairs and tables that are in the room that, when they're in the room, these table racks take up space that could go to people space, right? So a lot of those sorts of discussions as we get down into, how many square feet does a rack of chairs actually take? Just a quick report back on Tix Keeper, which is our new museum pass system. Mostly positive, folks, but there have been some people who it's a new system, so some people are finding it frustrating. We're going to continue to watch that and make sure. I think we expect those to drop off as people become more familiar with the system. But the people who are positive really like to be able to request that museum pass ahead of time and know on a certain weekend coming up that they have that available to them. Lots of great programs. Again, the continuing affiliation that we have with the Bethlehem Historical Association, their speaker series, very well attended, 88 people in this room. A very well attended art association. Last month was the BCSD art show, an extremely well attended. We would be dividing that up between the elementary and middle school and high school next year, just to give us a little bit more space in this room. But it was very popular as people came in and out. The attendance was 148, not all at the same time in this room, of course, but it was an extremely well attended event. I'm not gonna, there's Elephant and Piggy. We had talked about that a little bit last month. Overall, during the day, we had more than 250 people attend the Elephant and Piggy program. And this was, again, a program put on by our librarians. So this, I just put this in here because I really wanted to talk about this really increased demand for children's programs, children's reading programs in the community. It was echoed to me by another director, the director of the Colony Library, is saying they're seeing 120 typically now. That's a much larger community than Bethlehem, but they're seeing 120 kids at their reading program. So they may have to put a limit in to people who live in the district just to give them priority because the attendance is so high there. So not just us. Lots of good outreach. We always like the Healthy Kids Day at YMCA. That it gets a good bang for the buck. And then parents will be seeing our librarians out in the schools during the month of June, getting ready to start talking about the summer reading program and make sure that kids are aware that we're going to be running the summer reading program and they should be coming in and getting signed up. There are new Peanuts cards, the most popular library card that we've ever issued. It's a limited edition. So we have a run of 3,000 of those, and they're here and available to anybody who lives in the Bethlehem School District. Existing or new card members, you can come in and get, a Snoopy Scout card. They're pretty cute. I like them. And then we just wanted to talk a little bit. We've been talking about this physical circulation. So just dropped slightly, about 600 out of 39,000, just April to April in 2024. We're seeing some decent numbers, but we saw an increase in adult fiction circulation, physical, which was nice, but the adult video, like the physical, adult video, the video collection. Yes.
Not the adult video.
Not the adult video collection. It's not that kind of language. The video, the movie circulation, the DVD circulation just continues to tank. And I know there's, people fighting back against streaming. We're not going to get out of the DVD business, but just an awareness that that circulation just isn't there. And it's nothing we ever completely hung our hat on. And I'm glad that we didn't, because it's just, people are just moving away from that. Again, for the second time post-pandemic, we had a higher than 20,000 door count. I hope it never goes below 20,000 again. I hope that we've seen the last of those days ever. It just pleases me to no end to see that number go back up. And again, right now we've got AP tests going on, so we're seeing a huge, just the studying feels like 2018 in here right now. So there's a lot of studying going on. We bought whiteboards. I didn't think whiteboards were going to be so popular, but we bought extra whiteboards for these rooms. They've ended up being used in the main part of the library and the study rooms, as the students like to use the whiteboards as they're studying in their small groups. So that's great. And then nominating committee, we already talked about that. We had the Meet the Candidates night, which was mentioned in the public comment period. It was the largest attendance at a Meet the Candidates night we've ever had. So I was pleased to see that. It's available on YouTube for anybody who wants to watch that. Developing leader, and I did go to a seeker process webinar, so I know more about that. Talked about statistics, everything you need from there. I think that's good enough for now. You got a heavy agenda. If you've got any questions for me, I'm happy to take them.
Any questions for Jeff? Okay, so I'll go right to you, HLS.
Well, UHLS is also busy these days. At the monthly meeting this last week, the board unanimously approved a motion to allow beginning discussions about permitting Schenectady Public Library to come into Upper Hudson in light of the disagreement over the service, the services they were getting through their joint arrangement, they were not happy with. So there was a lot of discussion. There's a lot of concern among members, particularly libraries that are close to Schenectady in terms of the impact on them. But I think, this was just let's talk about, what it would involve and how it could happen. And there's also a lot of interest, if it is permitted, that they become full members in Upper Hudson. So not just kind of taking, what they want and not really contributing elsewhere. So that has started. We also authorized and approved all the annual awards for next month for the annual celebration. So hopefully everybody will be at that. And that's about it, I think. So.
Where was Schenectady before? Like, were they kind of on their own or?
They were part of
The Mohawk Valley
Mohawk
Library System.
and Sal's though.
Yes, and then so the Southern Adirondack Library System, which is to the north of us, that's Saratoga, Warren, and North. They have a joint circulation agreement, so they share a checkout system.
Okay.
So those two systems join together to have that automation system. So, so Schenectady is interested in withdrawing from that agreement between those systems. And I think they want to circulate with the Upper Hudson Library System. That's a formal request that they've made. And then with the idea that they would, it seems to me, to eventually join the Upper Hudson Library System as opposed to the Mohawk Valley Library System. But that's all library politics. So I don't think that any of that's set in stone yet.
And they have withdrawn, so.
They've withdrawn from the joint automation agreement.
The agreement.
Yeah, so that's the system. Saying system too many times. The software agreement around the software that allows for the checkout of the books and the mutual exchange of books between libraries. Okay. They are withdrawn. They've formally announced their withdrawal from that. They would like to make a similar agreement with Upper Hudson. Upper Hudson seems to be signaling to me that we'll explore this. You're going to foot the bill for the difference on what it would cost Upper Hudson to run itself. You have to foot the courier and all of that stuff. Yeah. And then, but they're not really interested in that interim step being the final step. Upper Hudson is saying, well, if you're going to come and join us,
come as a full member.
Come in.
Yeah.
What were the implications of them coming back? Is there any?
I think there's concerns because they're huge. So
yeah.
There's 158,000 people that live in Schenectady. They've got 60,000 active library card holders. So fewer library card holders than Albany itself, city of Albany, right at 100,000, but a higher population. So just they're from a funding level, they're very similar to Colony per capita funding level. It's just instead of 85,000 people or whatever Colony has, 158,000. So.
Okay.
That's it.
Any questions?
Lots more on this.
Lots of questions.
Lots more on this. Yeah.
Okay. They just started the discussions.
Yeah.
yes.
Sounds good. Any questions for Lisa? We're moving on to new business, the property transfer resolutions, page 28 to 36.
All right, so folks, these are a set of resolutions and an agreement between the library and the school district that would transfer, and there's an updated version of this, which I'll click over to here in a second. An upgraded deed that would transfer the 50, 51, 53, and 59 properties to the school district for the purposes of this. And then also included in your packet is an agreement, what is effectively the terms of a long-term lease that describes the rights and responsibilities of both the library and the school district in this truly unique and rather odd relationship that a school district and a school district public library have on New York State law. So there are several resolutions that have to have to happen here. And will be signed officially by, this is all board action. So there are.
Did have one question.
Yeah, I'm ready.
Yeah, I have a bunch of questions.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, do you want to go on the, by order on the resolution, or do you want to go to the agreement? I have questions.
Say again?
So I have questions on the actual agreement and in the back, so
Okay.
we want to go page by page.
Yeah,
Any
page by
questions
page
on
would be good.
page 28?
Yeah, I have a question. I think it's on page 28 in the same language. It says by the, I think, under resolved number 2, that the officer's name below, but I couldn't find whatever, who's gonna sign, what officers are they gonna be? I know there's a listing for the secretary. Is that the single officer? That's it? Okay. That's it for that one.
Any other questions on page 28? Okay. Page 29? Pretty much the same thing. Votes. Okay, page 30. The warrant B. Interesting. 31. 32. And going to the agreement, page 33. Page 34. I had a question. Go ahead, you go first.
Okay,
Yeah.
under 3A, is that what you have a question on? The
No.
very top? Okay, so on 3A, it talks about, it sounds like it's starting to mirror our meeting room policy. A library shall not assign or sublease the library premises except rental of space per a duly written agreement or policy. This specific agreement shall not be assigned or sublet without written consent of the school district. Is that agreement, the duly written agreement with the subletting agreement, the leasing agreement with a group? See what it says, so the
Yeah,
first sentence says
I
that.
got you. Yeah.
And so the second sentence starts this specific agreement. Does that agreement mean the agreement between the library and the group that's renting a space?
No, this would be
Okay.
about subletting the entire,
Capital agreement.
subletting the library for not library purposes.
It's saying that the library cannot sublet this agreement.
Like a tenant kind of thing?
Yes. It
Okay.
can't, it cannot give its responsibilities to someone else under
Okay.
this agreement.
So it has nothing to do with meeting room?
No.
Because it said rental of space per a duly written agreement, so that was a little confused. So you're talking about like space as like a tenant space?
Yeah.
Does that need to be clarified? I'm looking at the lawyer.
I don't think so. I mean, no, because I think agreement is a defined term here. It's capitalized there. So I
Okay.
think that it's clear that it's referring to this agreement. And I think I think sublease is a very different thing.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I have a question on 6. On the insurance,
Mhm.
how does that relate to our current insurance coverages? Is it more, is it less, is it the same?
It's the same, 2 million.
It's a million per occurrence, 2 million general aggregate, 2 million products and completed operations.
Thanks, Tanya. Yeah.
It's the same as we have now?
Yes.
Okay, so not asking for any additional changes. Okay. Anything on 34? 35?
I have a quick question on the, more a heads up on the section 8 on defaulting. So is that you too? So as far as I know, that if something happens and the district gives the library written notice of the default, it looks like we have to cure the default. Again, I'm looking kind of at the attorney, but let's miss language. Within 20 days, is that a standard amount of time, or is that a reasonable amount of time that? It's a, yeah, so yes.
I mean, I probably would have wanted more time on this, but I will say it's not, doesn't mean that you have to fix it in 20 days, because if you look at the comma, it says, if library does not commence such cure within 20 days and thereafter proceed with diligence to cure the default, the school may bring an action against the library in Supreme Court. So what they're saying is that we have 20 days to commence a corrective action plan of some kind, not that they can terminate us. They can terminate this in 20 days. They're saying, we tell you a problem. Then you have 20 days to come up with a plan. If on day 20, you don't have a plan to fix what we say is wrong, we have the right to take you to court.
Okay. So what if we disagree with them on if it's a problem.
I do not see language that necessarily addresses our ability to do that.
Right, and then what if they default?
It is not mutual language.
Right. So I have concerns over that. Default should be both ways, and there should be a process for agreement, disagreement on the default. Just to be fair, it's a equal agreement here.
I guess the question is, how can the library default and how can the school district default on this?
Right.
What would we have to corrective action plan them for?
I don't know.
Because I think that will be the argument back.
What would they have to correction action plan to us on?
Let's say, I mean, think,
Insurance.
We didn't manage.
yeah, we didn't make insurance, or we're letting someone rent parking spaces in the parking lot.
Right.
What, I guess,
The library doesn't help us on the election, on page 34, number 5. I mean, that's the thing, they have some responsibilities here, not much, but they have some responsibility. But they say we're not gonna assist you with the election.
I mean, I think that as part of I don't disagree with the argument of mutuality. I just think that when we present it back, we have to present what they could default on that we are trying to prevent. And that gives them an opportunity, if they don't want to make it purely mutual, that to at least give us a right to take action if they don't live up to certain obligations.
Okay. I mean, I'm sure I could come up with other examples, but that's one is,
Yeah.
in 15 seconds I had to. So, I don't know, I just think it's a mutual agreement, it should be mutuality across the board. And I would ask for more than 20 days too. But.
At least, I think 30. To your question of what is common, I think 30 days is a common response.
On page 30, the address is incorrect. The address is incorrect.
Yeah, let's use lower.
And the zip code is Rebecca.
This is not ready.
No.
That draft originated with whom?
With the district's attorney and the library's attorney.
And has our attorney had a presented comments on that, or a red line of some kind? Or have just reviewed it?
They've been back and forth on this a lot.
So if the board has, it sounds like a section where they would like either more information and or a revision.
Yeah.
Would the step be for you to flag that to our attorney, who then goes, because this is the first time we're actually seeing the legal layout.
Correct.
And then work it out, and then perhaps if needed, the board can have a special meeting to review. I would imagine that's the process.
Yeah,
Sure.
absolutely.
Is there any time frame that's driving this?
Not until October,
Yeah,
I mean.
I mean, there's nothing before that.
I mean, maybe, is the seeker ready to this? That's a question.
That's a gray area.
Two different answers.
Yet
Yes and no.
yet to be D about that. So
I thought that Suzanne did say, though, that for them to continue to move forward in the process, that they needed this.
the architects and the landscape architects are very interested in us completing this 4 months ago. So yes, but I have two legal opinions that differ on whether we need to have this in place before seeker begins or not. It's about the subdivisibility of the seeker process itself.
Okay.
So I'm gonna propose something that the board asks the director to seek counsel as to whether or not this could be addressed within 2 weeks. And that if needed, the board comes for either a special meeting or be presented in the next meeting for re-review and approval.
2 weeks is very near Memorial Day, just pointing it out.
I'm sorry, say again?
2 weeks is very near Memorial Day weekend, just pointing it out.
Early June meeting.
Okay.
Within reasonable, but no later than next meeting.
Got it.
Right, no later than this. Okay, so we got variance. Library property agreement resolution.
That's both of those
That's both those.
tied together.
Boring proposal.
The boring proposal.
Okay.
It's not really exciting.
Exactly.
My self-indulgence with that. So it has been proposed by our engineers that we we sign an agreement to have formed a 500-foot test bore design and installation for the purposes of a thermal conductivity test. So this is a test that would be necessary for them to determine whether or not the ground underneath us is able to support a geothermal well for the geothermal system that was proposed. Everybody's with me? Okay. So it's an expensive process. The good part about this, so the total price is $36,000, so it's over my authorization limit by a significant margin. The good part about the process is that that test bore would become one of the 5 or 6 wells that would become part of the geothermal system should it be constructed. So it is an important part of the design, as it was explained to me by our engineers and architect, that in order to design the system properly and make sure it is sized properly, they have to know whether the earth that we're on will hold and distribute the heat that would be necessary to run the geothermal.
Can I have a comment, Jeff, and correct me if I'm or misrepresenting, because I was in the architect meeting with Jeff when this came up, and I asked them if they could wait until after the bond vote. And I was under the impression they said they wouldn't want to, but they could. Is that
so? They can do anything. So the risk of that would be if they move forward with the assumption that the earth will do what the earth needs to do. They'll design a system, an HVAC system that would be included in our design development process, which we're in right now. We could get to the end of that design development process guessing that it works. So the risk to the organization to not doing this now would be the potential for further expense to redesign the system should it be found out eventually that the ground can't support the heat load eventually.
So the risk is additional cost.
Correct. But then the risk of us doing it is that if the bond doesn't pass, you've spent $36,000 to drill a 500-foot hole. So I understand this, okay? The question is really, to me, it seems the simplest explanation of the question is, in whatever design the library would eventually move forward with, if there needed to be a redesign, would a geothermal HVAC system be included as part of that design? If it's this current design, then it would be. If it was a different design, would that be?
I mean, we would not be able to do a geothermal if the earth doesn't support it.
It would have to be sized different. I think what
we'd want to know, that's something, it's kind of like we want to know what the,
correct.
I guess, what would we learn from this prior to October? That may have some value if the bond goes down.
Right. I think what they're trying to learn is whether the thermal conductivity of the ground that's beneath us, and I'm imagining that involves the amount of water that's down there as well. And does our property, does our earth allow us to have that kind of system, or would it need to be sized differently? Would there need to be, say, oh, well, the thermal conductivity is lower than we would want it to be. So now in order to make a geothermal system, you'd have to drill 10 wells, which increases the eventual cost of the system. It does have to do specifically with the design of that system.
Yeah.
So.
And if they have to drill additional wells without, so once your bond, let's just say, assume the bond passes, got that pot of money. Whatever that pot of money, whatever, so let's call it 35 million.
Right.
Whatever's gonna be built, done, designed, appear is gonna come out of that money. So if they need 10 wells in order to get a geothermal, it's gonna come out of that, and let's say it's additional cost, it's coming out of that, I think 35 million.
But
No?
if you remember,
Right.
the geothermal is, I think we're thinking that we would pay for it with other funds, because we expect to be able to get reimbursed for a significant portion of it. So that was not going to be included in the bond that we're looking at is 30 million, 32 million, I forget. We've changed the number so many times.
Right.
32 million, that doesn't include the 4 million for the geothermal. So
Okay.
any additional expense on the geothermal, I mean, obviously we have to be paid,
Yeah.
but it wouldn't be paid out of the 32 million, because that's already committed for all the rest of the costs of the new building, of the new addition.
Right, well, any additional cost for the jail is gonna have to come out of somewhere.
Right,
Yeah,
right,
Yes.
yeah,
right.
yeah, that's.
All dollars are green, right?
Right,
It's coming out of.
Right, and to be honest, the bond is 32 million, they get to that amount by giving us a certain design and their estimates and all those. That pot, especially like the budget, that pot of money can be,
Right, it's fluid.
you know, you say, oh, this is gonna cost more, so we're gonna give up that once the. I'm interested in any other questions, and then I'll tell you how I anticipate voting, unless I hear something otherwise in what.
Can you remind us about the other holes they drilled and what they found?
Yes, so they drilled some holes much shallower, right? So those were more like 50-foot holes, and those were not about the conductivity of the ground because they were not for wells. They were drilling down to see if the physical support of the earth that's below us would hold a building of any particular design. And that was inconclusive. And they came back and they used a seismic geophone system to try to look down deeper. And again, it's not that the building can't be built. I'm sorry, getting on a tangent. It's about seeing if structurally the ground that we're on can support the building. So that was a geotechnical survey about physical support. This is about not about that at all. This is about running a geothermal system for heating and air conditioning.
So I guess the question is whether or not the bond passes in October, does any addition or project that we do in the future include geothermal?
That great. As you
So-
said to me.
Right.
Can we answer that? I don't. I mean, I'd like to say yes, but
Well, if we do this, we'll know more than we do now, and we'll know how much a geothermal would cost. I mean, it would, we say 4 million, but if they find, oh, it's gonna cost more than that, then that might influence the decision. But it is a big expense to go before the bond.
it is.
Yeah,
Compared to the cost of design development, though,
it's not that
It's
big.
not.
it's a
It's not
relatively small. I would hate
Right.
to. The risk to me is, are we willing to risk incurring additional
Right.
design expense
Later in the.
unnecessarily later to save the money on drilling this test well or not? And I understand that it's a big hole in the ground, right? And I
Right.
if we are interested in geothermal, no matter what, if that is, I think there are a lot of incentives for that. If we are interested in that as an organization, then I think the decision is super easy. But if we don't know, then I can understand the risks. I understand the reticence, so.
Okay.
If you're looking for my recommendation, I would recommend that we drill a hole. I would hate to not spend $36,000 and then have it blow up in our face after October 1st. If we get a yes,
Yeah.
then we're, oh, oops, it's not sized properly and we have to go back and send the engineering team and the architect team back to redesign the whole system because the ground can't support it. That's my recommendation, but again.
Any board members have comments? Lori, anything? I know you're interested.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think the combination, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, now we got you.
Sorry. I think that, I mean, it feels like I certainly hope that this is the direction that we're going in regardless of the vote. And so the combination of that and the potential for the additional cost by not doing it, I mean, that to me lends itself to moving forward with this now.
Any questions?
I will be opposed to this just because I think it's an amount of money that we could wait on. And should the bond not be successful, the library could go out for a smaller bond, which would be my recommendation, to do some basic maintenance on the library and upgrading. And I'm not sure what would be available for geothermal at that point. And if, let's say, a second bond goes out for roughly, and this would be my recommendation anyway, I'm leaving the board, but to go right out for May for a second bond and price it for carpeting, paint, asbestos, and all the rest. And I'm not sure the amount of that second bond could accommodate geothermal, or if there'll be alternate funds. So I just feel like it's an amount of money that we should wait to spend until we know what's going on with the public support or non-support of the bond.
Okay, I'll take a motion on the proposal to spend $36,000 for boring and reporting.
So moved.
Okay, second.
I'll second.
Okay. Any further discussion on the proposal? Okay, all those in favor signify by raising your hand. All those opposed? Okay, motion carried. Thank you. Okay, other new business. Any other new business? Old business, construction manager.
Mark,
update.
hold on just a minute.
Sure,
I just wanted, I'm not sure if I should bring it up now or on future business, but one of the things that I think talking about as we've been having a lot of positions on the board coming up for being filled not during a regular election is whether or not we should consider keeping our terms at 5 years. And I recently had a conversation with a member of the Guilderland Library, and they are in the process of reducing the size of their board and shortening their terms from 5 to 3 years. And I think the size of our board is great. I do think we've had some issues over the years getting candidates who are interested in running for a 5-year term because it's a long commitment. So I'd like to propose looking into shortening our term going forward if the board is in support of that.
Question, Lisa, you're talking about positions that come up for election, anyone who is currently in a position, anyone who is currently in the middle of their term would keep
Stay.
the current.
That's my understanding of how it's done.
Yeah, the state has the rechartering mechanism. The state has mechanism because Guilderland recently eliminated those 2 positions on their board.
Right.
So that they have directions and mechanisms. I couldn't quote that to you, but they have a way to get that done when there's a change.
Yeah, I always thought that was the way to go. I think that's obviously the way to go in the future.
I mean, and we've talked about it kind of anecdotally over the years and not really done anything. So
Okay.
I feel like this is a good time to propose it and,
Sure.
have a discussion about it.
I mean, it's a bylaw change.
Under new business, perhaps for the next, so whatever's new business future business becomes new business at the next meeting, right? Is that what you're proposing? Because I think that don't we have a future business? And so whatever is listed in the future business for this meeting becomes new business next?
Right, and it's just to clarify, it's not just a bylaws change, it's that and then also a charter change with New York State, so we have to apply.
We have to pass the bylaws before.
Yeah,
we plan
you
to
got
say-
it. Yeah.
Yeah, I just didn't know where it belonged on the
Yeah,
agenda,
that's
so.
cool. Yeah, definitely. I don't know if other people, other trustees have comments.
Yes,
So-
the only argument I could think against doing a shorter term is that there is, I know I myself personally experienced this, there is a learning curve when you become a member of a board, and the shorter terms means you have fewer people with greater expertise on your
Yeah.
board.
Yeah, I would just say, I think 5 years is likely an impediment to people, stepping up and running, because it's a long time. 5, 6 years feels like long term. But so it's a balance, right? You want it to be long enough so that you have time to get up to speed and you're not just campaigning. But I kind of tend to agree that a shorter term would potentially help attract additional candidates who might be intimidated by the 5-year term.
Okay, any other thoughts on it? So we'll talk about next steps on that.
Yeah.
Great. Okay, any other new business? Moving to old business, construction manager update.
Okay, so I
You had 2 people.
gave it mostly ahead of time. Yeah, we have two formal applicants for a construction manager. And did we decide last time who was on? Which of the board members was on? Yeah, so we got the 2 of you, so we're all set. And Sherry's gonna work on preparing a comparison document
Great.
between the 2 to have that ready for everybody can have it, but it'll be interviewing team, and we'll get the doodles out and get those interviews set up. We've got the story time room booked, so we can get those in. There's only 2 interviews, so that'll be hopefully pretty quick and painless, but we'll work around your schedules and get that set up.
Do you expect any more responses, or?
We're past the deadline.
We're past
No,
it.
that's it. The deadline was Thursday,
Okay.
and these are the 2 groups that came, these
came to
2,
look
they
at-
came to us, they talked with Kevin and me. And they, they did a physical inspection of the library. The other almost 10 companies that we sent it out to were not. It seemed to be the biggest question they had was about the phasing of the project. That's their expertise. So they were interested in the intention of the library to stay open. They were surprised a little bit by, but I think it was, you'll see it reflected in their proposals.
And in the architect meeting, we asked Suzanne to forward questions if they had things that they would want us to ask the construction, or if they had some stock questions to follow up with that. And I think last month we talked about reaching out to the district too, to see if they had any kind of recommendations or stock questions.
We got their questions from the school district, and my intention is, especially with just 2, hopefully we can have Suzanne or Representative from Ashland McGraw in our interviews with us. So, we'll keep it, under 8 people in the room, hopefully like 6. I think it'll go well.
Okay, the next old business is the public meeting policy update. So pages 43 through 51, your packet. And out last week, so people got a chance to look at it and do it. If you have any questions, any questions or concerns about that policy?
Mark, I'll just if it's okay, I'll take a minute to kind of tee up how this came to be.
Sure.
So in the packet, you have a clean version and you have a red line version that shows the changes from the version that was in the April packet. It looks like a significant rewrite, and it is, in that there were many line item edits and that there was some restructuring, but the elements of the policy have not significantly changed. Most everything that was in there remains in there, though edited. The changes reflect 20 pages of comments from individual board members, from staff, and we took into consideration things that we heard from the public. I think the policy committee would like to assure you that each comment was considered and addressed to the extent possible. So just kind of for the benefit of the public, we go back to, again, we are not required to make meeting policies available, but we are choosing to. And one of the considerations in drafting this policy is that we are very aware that we are putting up $32 million now? $32 million bond for which a significant feature is community rooms. And one of the reasons for the rewrite for this policy is that we want to assure the public that we can manage those community rooms at the capacity levels and with the breadth of programming that we hope to have in those. We are working on this publicly in the interest of transparency, and I think that's a tough thing to do. This is how the sausage is made. I think that in most cases, by the time the public sees a draft of something, it has gone through significant edits and it is in a final form. So just, for the benefit of the public, we are letting you see this process, which is not always pretty. And we just wanted to point that out. But I'm going to pitch it to Jeff in a second, but just kind of the themes that came out of the comments were highlighted in green in the clean one that you received, or those go through.
So what we have is those kind of, we roll through the policy here.
Got it. I will say that the comments, while, there were always outliers, the comments did have very common themes. So it was not hard to see where things had to go. But one of the themes is certainly continuing to understand the 4 buckets of use that we have. So the takeout for library card holders, community room use by community organizations, affiliation agreement, and community groups. So I think we want to be careful about talking about what is and is not permitted by the First Amendment, because none of us are legal scholars on that point. But to assure everyone, we do have the input of our attorney and we are continuing to work with her. But I'm going to pitch it to Jeff to address some comments that we have received both internally and externally regarding why and how community groups, how that bucket of use, how that is protected by the First Amendment, how it serves the First Amendment, and why that is useful to the library and why it is permitted.
Right. So the library restrictions on use of library spaces specifically, but really a lot of things that are dealt with in a public library have to do with time, place, and manner. Right. So you're allowed to have time, place, and manner restrictions on use of library facilities, and they have to be neutral. So in some of the ways, I've heard a lot of comments from people that say, oh, there should be a difference between a meeting and a presentation for the public, right? There's no way for the library to objectively determine what is a meeting of one's members and what is a presentation for the public. So when we talk about the library resources have to be equitably distributed. Right. So all of our rules, I mean, if we weren't concerned about that, the rules would be like, take whatever you want, keep it as long as you want, and keep it home. That would be like a book. You could keep that book forever and ever, but that's not an equitable use of a community resource, right? How do we have equitable use of community resources? The least invasive way for us to say is that these rooms that we make available to you are like a checkout of a book. It's like a library of things. It's like a museum pass. And that most of the use of the rooms we anticipate being just a library card checkout. You want to use the room to get a small group of folks together who are interested in making a bike group. Check out the room just like everybody else. Come on in and you can have that. And we have frequently been asked in the past why the rooms have to be open, right? So the rooms need to be getting distracted there. So this allows for people who want to use the room and reflects a thing that we already do, like study rooms, for instance. They're a smaller room, but really it's effectively no different. It's administered slightly differently, but someone's using that exclusively during their time using that. No one would be in a study room and expect that just some person pops into their room, right? They have exclusive use of that room while they request the time. So that's the majority of the non-library use of the rooms. It would be handled under that library card checkout process. Now, we have some limits in there about the capacity and the size of the room, and it's based on what we actually observe people doing here. What do people actually want? And that's the rationale for that capacity, which again is a neutral, non-discretionary aspect to say how big is the room? You can have 35 people in the room, you have 25 people in the room, you have 65 people in the room. That number is neutral and it's objective and it can be used, right? So that's the library room checkout. The rationale for the 501c3 is that currently and right now under our current policy, we have a person whose job it is to try to determine whether a group is or is not for profit or not profit seeking, or almost like the inverse of profit seeking, because what's not allowed under our current policy is for profit use of that. It is an ugly process. It is difficult for us to determine. And the objective way, the neutral way for us to be able to say, yes, this group meets the nonprofit nature of groups who want to use this room in its large capacity is to use the federal government and the registration as a 501c3 nonprofit corporation, because we can be very, very reasonably assured that that group meets the criteria for being nonprofit. The other possibility is that you can use the charities registration with the New York State Office of the Attorney General. It's a little bit more loosey-goosey, but again, requires a group to be registered with the New York State Attorney General, and it's something that we can look up and know, right? So we're not guessing, we're not doing a voir dire process trying to figure out with people as we go back and forth and say, what is the nature of the use of this room? And it's primarily based on the for-profit. And believe me, there's plenty of for-profit organizations that would love to use the rooms here in the library. It's just not an acceptable library use. And there's some other non-allowed uses of library space. It's tax-funded space. So we need to be able to use an objective criterion. And the objective criterion is that 501c3 status. So those are those two buckets, right? Then we've got a bucket of affiliated organizations, right? So these would be groups that are that are providing programs for the library on the library's behalf with library involvement. So think of the Friends of the Library doing a book sale. Think of the Bethlehem Historical Association doing a history class. Their staff, they're volunteers. It's not staff. They're volunteers at the Bethlehem Historical Association are out creating, finding content, bringing it in, but they're doing that in conjunction with our staff. We're fully aware every step along the way of who the speakers are going to be. We're involved with them. We film them. We reserve the room. So it's done in conjunction with library space. So that's those affiliated organizations. It's an official relationship between the library and the organization. It would be voted on, as spelled out in the policy, would be voted on by the board. So it's a very public process to say which groups is the library officially affiliating with that are providing programming on behalf of the library. And the last is mostly this switch that I don't anticipate being used all that often because it's relatively more involved process. But if people want to offer a program here at the library that is going to be larger and is going to have a higher room capacity, may or may not be certainly nothing to do with the library's interests. As a nonprofit ourselves, so we are a government entity, but we are also a 501c3. We have our 501c3 registration. And so it's not necessarily a 501c3 organization that's putting on the program. They want to put on a program here, and they can rent the space just like you would at the school district. So if you go and look at the school district policy, they'll rent out the spaces available for either a for-profit company or another organization that wants to host a program here on the library. And the cost of that is a recognition of the extra staff time that goes into hosting and regulating a larger organization doing a larger program like that. So,
and am I correct that they're also in effect paying for the privilege of a private
correct
event, and that is the only category in which
where you get your private event with the library card checkout. You're saying that's mine. I'm using it like I'm taking home a book, right? Like just like I take it home, I'm just using it here. It's my exclusive use. That's that library, that room checkout process. The affiliated organization, there would be it's open. It is what it is. The Bethlehem Historical Association, Friends of the Library, those are open meetings. The nonprofits, which we are granting to nonprofit organizations, because we're saying that, this is a public good. A 501c3 is a public good. We're saying we're in recognition of the fact that you're a public good. You can have the space that's for your use, but it's got to be open to the public. And then this last thing would be, right, it could be closed. You can ticket it. I mean, it's, like a dance recital or something like that. I mean, so to do an example that actually happens here, a piano recital.
Right.
So if someone wanted to hold a piano recital, they, I don't think they mostly care whether someone comes in or not, but they might be, every chair that's in here is filled with parents. You wouldn't want to have the parents for the piano recital not be able to come in because members of the public are already in the space. That's the type of use that they want in the room. They want to be able to use the space exclusively. And that's the rationale for that space rental. It's handled in our policy in a little bit less of a formal way right now, where it's mostly dance recitals and music performances are allowable into space. They have to pay to have the piano tuned. It's mostly piano recitals. So the space is allowable now. This formalizes that use and makes it clear that we would have a contract with them and handle a little, lots more formally, less informally than we have in the past.
This almost seems like a natural outgrowth of a few months ago. Remember, we used the umbrella icon that Cole was saying we had gotten from our attorney,
Right.
saying there were different kinds of things happening in the library.
There already are. I mean,
Right. And I always remember that the umbrella thing is like,
Right.
Figuring out different groups, different usages. And so we've been kind of parsing down and flushing out the actual language and the groups. So
right.
it seems like kind of a very natural outgrowth of that.
In some libraries with more spaces, they only make rooms available under different terms. So if we had, well, there's never enough rooms, but let's say this room, we say, this room is only available for it's mostly for library programs. That's what it does first. Then it's available for nonprofits, and then it would be available for rental if you need to use it. And then we have other rooms that are available under other uses where they're just only under room checkout. Some other room only available under room checkout. It's not available for the nonprofits. It's just that we don't have enough room to make that happen. And not most of what goes on in this room, what goes on mostly in this room are library programs, children's story times. That's what the majority of the use of this room is. Of those things that are not our uses, the public uses of this space, it is mostly things that don't need a room quite this large, but this is where they have to go because they don't quite fit in the boardroom, or the boardroom is already not available. So these are the two rooms that I have. These are the rooms that I have available. So it doesn't, I don't have a room size that perfectly fits 30 people. But so we carve that out of this space, and that's what we're trying to reflect in the policy.
Can I ask two clarifying questions?
Yeah.
One sort of like a comment. So like as a library card holder, I am going to start a needlepoint craft group,
Yeah.
right? I can just check out a room with my card and have my needlepoint craft group without having to prove anything, show anything, do anything, as long as I don't exceed the 25 people.
Correct.
Right. Okay. And then my second question is, we had talked about insurance at one time. And so I wasn't sure with the 501(c)(3)s or
Three.
C3,
Yeah.
whatever. Is part of that also like an insurance issue? I think the example I've used in the past is like, so as the PTA president at Ellesmere, we are a registered 501(c)(3). We have our own insurance. So I'm having the carnival at Ellesmere. I've signed the building use form. I've paid my money for that. And somebody falls in the bouncy house and breaks their legs and they want to sue someone. They're going to sue me because it's under my insurance for PTA. Do you know what I'm saying? And not this
First, anyway.
Right. So was that part of our calculation of picking those types of groups, assuming that they have to have more regulations, or was that not part of it?
It's a trend in libraries. That's not necessarily, I don't think that's the reason, that's the primary reason. It's certainly the reason when we talk about the rental agreement, we're saying, additional insured, like there's a lot more formality going on there. But I think it's mostly an interest of saying, we don't want to create that level of formality for what is the vast majority of use, which is completely unnecessary. The library has insurance. We always have as a public building. We want people to use the spaces. We want people to come in. We want to be able to use them in an equitable way. How can we reduce the barriers for people for the use of these rooms. We want the rooms in use. So that library card checkout simplifies all of that. Someone is a borrower of the library, they're a library patron, or a taxpayer. They want to take the room, please take the room. We want you to use it. And then as the sizes of that's those capacity limits, as the sizes get larger, our interest in understanding more about that we have assurance that it's falling in line with our nonprofit requirements. We want to, and we want to make sure that's going on there. We also have crowd control concerns. I see that up there. From a staff standpoint, that's my primary concern is how can we handle the crowds, which happens lots of times, right? So how can we manage those? And it's not one particular group that has been overcapacity in the room or overcapacity in the hallway. We've had to deal with these things. I think it's a formalization and a recognition of the responsibility on the group to make sure that those things are being monitored. And if the staff notices, we're going to call people on it. We're going to say, hey, this room's over capacity. Your art group is filling up the hallway and people can't access the library, which by the way is a thing that has happened. So we're saying these are the consequences of that. If you do that, we're going to clear the hallway, shut down the meeting, because we have to be able to maintain control of the rooms. But at the same time, just clarifying that the group is of course responsible for the action of what goes on in the room.
Yep. And regarding, yes, and kind of to that point, for community organizations, there is the opportunity for them to sponsor, to bring in organizations that might not have 501c3 status. And there has been some comments about, well, that means that we can't bring in a controversial speaker because no one will want to take on that responsibility. I think we would make a distinction between the content. A controversial speaker who speaks controversial content is one thing. Bringing in someone who is going to violate our conduct policy is an entirely different thing. So I would just respond that there is a mechanism to go beyond the community groups, but also that it remains content neutral and that it is a perfectly reasonable expectation to expect that community groups bring in other groups that they do not anticipate are going to disrupt the library or violate our other policies.
So I have another question for clarification. As we're looking at a building project that will give us larger meeting rooms. So say we have a social club, like a dancing club, and they're going to have well over 25 people, but they are not a 501c3. So then are they necessarily defaulted to the rental agreement group?
Or sponsorship by a 501c3, and or the capacity limits are under the control of this body, right? So if I don't see those, right? I'm happy to spin hypotheticals. I think it's important for us to discuss that. But if that's a thing that people wanted to do, I think that can be decided. The capacity limits of the room can be talked about, and the capacity limits of what constitutes a room checkout is under the control of this body. If the feeling is that 25 number is too low, then it can be set elsewhere, right? I think we came to 25 or 35 as a recognition of what is it that we actually see groups coming here and wanting to do.
Yeah, and I also think, and I hope that this is going to be reviewed on an annual basis. So we got probably 2 more shots at this policy before our meeting room opens.
Well, and that's what I was.
We're going to learn more about that because that's a good question. Like, this works for these 2 rooms right now, and it'll give us experience and data on how it works. If we get the bond pass, when we get the bond pass and we open up the 2 new rooms sometime in the future, this may not. We're going to have to change this. We're going to have to modify this.
And for the first year, we can say the board has to take a look at this every quarter. Understanding that there's going to be an adjustment period.
Yeah.
We can make it more than an annual review to start, or for the first 3 years, we will look at this every quarter, something like that. So there is a lot of room for adjustment.
I do think we have to be clear that this is a policy we're putting in place for the current building.
Right.
And,
It
you know,
is.
while we're putting a bond together for a building project, of course, if it's successful and we build the extension on the building, we'll revisit the policy.
Oh, yeah. Definitely.
But, you know, everyone seems to be looking into the future and saying, this policy doesn't work for that building. It's not intended for that building. It's
Yes.
intended for this building.
Sure, and also I would imagine that any board member could make a motion
Right. And
to put up for review the policy and then at any time, so I have a question just more on the process, unless there's other general questions on how to address those or the actual, you know, page by page and what's the general recommendation. Are we gonna like stay till we get through the, actually, I heard a bunch of numbers thrown around before. I think it's 7. It's a flat out, it's a flat 7-page policy. So are we gonna go page by page? Are we gonna go by this, or are we gonna do half tonight and half? I mean, what's the general recommendation or thoughts on the drafter team?
Do you want me to, or?
Yeah, I mean, my thought is we should vote on it as a policy. Like, let's vote on it. If people don't want to do that, I'm more than willing to go page by page, whatever, but I'm comfortable with as it's written, we can vote on it right now.
I'll propose an alternative.
Sure.
I think that, you know, what I'm hearing from Mark in that proposal is that I think there's a lot of, I think that the staff very much wants a new policy passed. I think the public very much wants a new policy passed, and we want to honor that wish, but also give people appropriate time to review it. If we go page by page tonight, certainly, and vote on it as an alternative, perhaps you guys have all had it a week for another week. If you want to submit another round of comments for not another significant rewrite, but to try to address things, and then potentially get through that at the June meeting, or, and I know no one loves this, we do a special meeting to address this. But I think that everyone has had a significant opportunity for comments. We can give you another opportunity for comments, but at some point there will have to be a pencils down moment related to this policy. If for no other reason than we have to put it into place to see how it works.
Now I I turned off my mic. I thought we were gonna talk about highlighted stuff, the stuff that's in green.
So did I.
Because I did have a question about like for the groups checking it out. One of the rules under that was like 1 adult for every 5 kids.
Right.
And I was just wondering how that number came up, because the uses that I know of, like lip sync and Cub Scouts, it's maybe like 2 adults for 10 kids because they're running the lip sync rehearsal and not all the parents stay. And I guess 2 adults for 10 kids. God, my math is super bad. That would work. But I was just wondering about that.
Yeah, I mean, we could talk about the bulleted stuff here that's on page 51. Those are those are comments that came up. We could talk about page by page, whatever you want to do. I mean,
it was my impression that those bulleted items were what came up from the original round.
Yes, those were
That
common
we didn't
themes.
agree.
Yes, and I will say just the themes were really numbers. The themes consistently were what should that ratio be?
Yeah.
What should the capacity limits be? What should the number of reservations a month be? So
the choice was 1 through 5, you know, 1 to 5. There are on the adult and minor adult use for room use. That is that's a choice. You can argue, well, I can argue both sides of that choice, but that was the choice that was made. So
What
So
section? Did you point us to the section where that is? Kind of like the visual. Like, where did that?
And I did some research. I mean, I talked to some parents. I also did some research on like the Office for Children and Family Services guidelines. And I think this is way too restrictive and not going to be very workable for parents, especially. So for example, I mean, it doesn't even match the library's policy, right? We allow children over 10 into the library unsupervised. So I'm not sure why we would require the same ratio of adults to children for young children and older children. So OCFS, for example, like through 9 years old, they have a 1 adult per 10 child ratio, maximum of 20.
Daycare facility regulated. This is
Right, but Right, it's not a daycare, but why would we have more strict requirements than a daycare? I
We
just,
have the regulatory scheme a daycare center has. There's a whole regulatory scheme in daycare. That's only one of the things.
right,
Having
but
worked in my career. There's a
you could look
whole-
at the school district too. I mean, you have one adult for 20 children. I think that there has to be
Right, I
some,
mean, yeah, definitely. I'm just saying, this is a choice. There's definitely other options, absolutely, yeah. But you can't do a straight one-to-one for daycare or school because it's a library, it's not the same. So-
right, but it's, their main goal is the safety of children. And so I think that that's a reasonable, it's just something to compare to. And so I just think I would say we should look at something different for young children, under 9 versus older children. But
What's your suggestion?
Yep.
Yeah,
So I would, for purposes of this discussion, guys, I would throw out your actual suggestion of it. So that we can kind of work with that as a comment. If you think a ratio should be something specific,
Yeah.
please say it. If you think that that 2 reservations should be allowed a month, like.
yeah, sure. I think a responsible adult. I would just say a responsible adult. I wouldn't necessarily set a ratio. That would be my recommendation.
you can have 24 kids and an adult.
But that's a classroom. I mean,
Okay, I mean, that's what that means, though. One to 25.
Are you looking right at the, should I
I'm
watch
trying to
it?
look at section. It's visual. I know it's all blurry, but I really.
I think there was also a question about what age is an adult, because we're using 18, and I think there were some proposals that it be a little older than that. I don't have a strong opinion either way, but I know that's one of the issues that came up, so.
So Laura, just so that I understand your proposal, you're saying that language should simply be that children should be under the age of 18 should be supervised by a responsible adult?
yeah, I think Albany has something like that. I was looking, I mean, again, I didn't have a lot of time to go line by line, but I was looking at some of the other policies, and I think Albany has something like that, just that there be a supervising adult when there are children.
7.
Yeah, so it's on page 49, number 7.
Thank you.
Does anyone else have a ratio that they prefer?
If you look at I think you can go higher than 5, so I would go to 8.
So 1 adult for every 8, I'm sorry, 1 adult for every 8 children?
Yep, 8 minors.
And-
I'd say 10, I think.
Okay. And Laura, you made a point about, do we want to have different standards for kids up to 9 versus kids between 9 and 18?
I kind of think that makes sense, and since 9 is what's in our other policy, I would stick with that. 10, of course, is like but we could go with 9.
So we're looking at, this is for kids under 9. And then the idea is that 9 to 18
We have a different ratio.
have a different ratio?
Yeah, I think 9 to 18 probably doesn't need a ratio, just needs like a supervising adult. And then the younger kids, if you want to have like a 1 adult to 10 kids, that seems reasonable. I have a class of 4 or 5-year-olds and it's uncontrollable sometimes.
I agree with Sarah's recommendations.
Laura, does that comport with what you were thinking about, the
Yeah, that sounds good.
different levels?
Yep.
Well, so, and then Lisa brought up, it's a different area, but like, is the responsible adult, like for signing out for groups and things, is that person gonna be 18 or 21? And right now it's 18.
It was, I know you were the one who commented, you were, I think, were the comment who asked whether that should be 18 or 21.
Yeah.
What do you think militates toward 21 if you think it does?
I guess because I feel like we're putting. It is quite a bit of responsibility for these groups that we're asking them to take on, rightly so. And I just feel like 18, although legally an adult, is still very young. And in my experience, teaching college freshmen who are approximately that age, I know that there's kind of difficulty still making decisions in that age group. I don't know. Knowing many students in the like 18, 19-year-old group, I just feel like I would feel uncomfortable putting them in charge of like a large event with a lot of attendees and anything. Some people could handle it. I just don't know. I don't know. I could be swayed. That's my feeling.
Well, I'm wondering about groups like seniors in high school, the theater kids coming to practice, or again, Odyssey of the Mind groups that are kind of science fair academic kind of
But they'd be
presentation.
checking it out, like using their library card, probably because they're not a registered 501c3.
Okay, so you're talking about larger groups.
Yes, I'm talking about.
All right, my
specific,
mistake then.
yeah.
Okay.
They could check it out, I'm sure, yeah.
Are you talking about the designated user?
Yes.
Okay. So do you think that, I think what I'm hearing is that like for the supervision of kids, the age could be 18. But to be a designated user who has to sign that form and take on responsibilities, you're saying that perhaps a more appropriate age is 21.
That is my thought, yeah.
No, I totally
Yeah, that's
agree.
my thought.
Does anyone else have?
No, I completely agree. 20, that's a more responsible age. I mean, hopefully.
Does anyone object to that? Does anyone have strong feelings against that? The idea of 21 for the designated user?
This is on the facility use contracts.
This would be for facility use contracts and for community use, really? Yes, for community use. And what about study rooms?
No, because we have.
That's the library card.
Right, library card
Yeah,
check out. I
Study
Yes.
rooms and library card checkout. It
Yep,
would
so
apply.
this would be for community use and for facility use.
Right, it would never come up for affiliated.
Yeah,
I don't have any opposition to going to 21.
Does anyone else? But we like 18 for supervision for the ratio of to 9-year-olds, under 9-year-olds. Okay. We will try to work that in. Room capacity limits.
Yeah.
Jeff, will you give the capacity limits for, they're in the policy.
There, yeah, we just amended those, right? So
We did.
we're to this is based on the room, right? So
Yes.
It's 55, and on the boardroom, we're at I'm gonna say 25. Just based, and that's coming up
Okay.
against a reasonable expectation in that room anyway.
So I will say that there is flexibility in this.
Yep.
And this was a very common comment. I think almost everyone commented on capacity limits of some kind. Knowing that right now it is written at 25 in the smaller room next door and it is 55 here. And that I think that Jeff has a top limit in mind. I think the staff has talked about what the top number is that they could actually manage. What does everyone think? What would everyone want to see those numbers increased by? Because no one wanted to decrease them, I should say. What does everyone want to see those numbers increased by?
Well, I think 25 is appropriate for the boardroom, having been in it myself,
Yeah.
a bunch, so I think that's fine. It's more this room I would suggest.
Correct. I mean, that's where, go ahead. No.
I was just gonna say, I'm not sure I've ever been in the boardroom with 25 people. That's a lot.
It's getting tight in there.
You have.
And you're well below fire code capacity, but you are absolutely getting up against any reasonable use
I
of
mean, it must just be chairs, not.
chairs and tables. Yeah, we'd have
Yeah.
to get the tables out.
I wouldn't increase those capacity limits.
What about in here?
Well, that's the question is, so if you were doing a
Our
library,
code's like high, right?
yeah, it's 109, and that's wicked unreasonable for any, you could stand around with 109 people in here. You'd be semi-comfortable in here with 109 people. 109 people in chairs in here, it's tight. and requires a lot of regulation to make sure that we're maintaining the fire. Humans aren't going to be controlled about where they want to put their chairs. So we set it, we want to get the rooms reopened. We set it at 55. I think in this room, you could reasonably have, 65-ish, 65, if you want to do that. I don't think I'm not going to pitch a fit. So over that, the setups become different. The management of the spaces become different. We have to get tables out of here. As that number starts to go up and up and up, there's more changes that are necessary to the room. So
we upped it in the policy to 65.
65, yeah.
Based on those comments, what does everyone think that's up, that is moving it up far enough? Or do you think that we can push that further? Understanding that at some point it becomes a staff management issue.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think 65 seems reasonable, right?
As do I.
I'm okay with it.
Yeah, I'm trying to envision like the numbers, so I'm saying rows of 5, 5, and 5, so that's 15. And then if you would go to 7, not that I'm advocating 75, but then it goes X number of rows. Right.
So think about the other night when, for those of you who are here for the candidates forum, that was set up for 40 people. So there's that block in the middle. When we just have like kind of a regular size block, a rectangle block in the middle of the room, that's 40. When we start getting larger than that, you start getting the wings out to the sides. And then, the highest capacities, we have to put more rows, still making sure that we have enough room. It gets tighter and tighter. And then like I said, the difficulty is the shape of this room. It presents many challenges to overcome. How about that? And it's the fire code exits towards the front and the back that be the biggest challenge for us as you get beyond 75. It really requires a lot of management in here to make sure that you're keeping any kind of reasonable fire code compliance and making sure people have exits out of the room.
So am I hearing that 65 is a general consensus of reasonableness?
Yes.
Good. I'm fine with 65. I was just gonna ask, generally, your largest events that are not library sponsored have been what? They're a lot smaller than that, right?
The vast majority of those, I think I have a number that I can't call it up here, unfortunately.
Okay.
We've done a look at the high capacity events. There are not very many public events that take place in this room over 65 people.
And
Okay.
I think I know that there have been story hours in this room that had more than 65.
That's different, right?
So I just want to make the distinction for anyone in the public that's listening, that the 65 for an outside event is based on really the staff's ability to manage it.
Right. And
That there is a different level of staff management when it is a library program, such as a children's story hour where we,
Right.
So-
And there's planned events and the chairs are put around the outside of the room. There's fewer chairs in here. I mean, just to be able to accommodate that, it's still, we're not anywhere near fire code capacity of the room. It still starts to feel tight in here with story times. I mean, I could complain about that, but there's nothing we're going to do. The room is the size that it is. As those children's story hours are increasing in popularity, it's just not enough room when you have dancing children in here. That goes to sort of Michelle's question about a dance group who wanted to book the room. The capacity of this room is not that high. It's highest when we have rows of chairs and you're doing a lecture, and you can see that's what this room was. The intention of the design of this room, just from the very shape of it, was clearly designed to have a speaker in the front and the middle, no screen because that hadn't been invented yet, and stand in the middle of the room, lecture to a room, and keep people reasonably close to the speaker because amplification may or may not have been much of a thing. So that's what the room's designed around, and I think it's 55 is easy. 65 is fine. 85 is a challenge, and 100 is a absolute sardine can. So,
Okay. Next point of commenting was the community sponsorship provision. So in the community organization section, the ability of community organizations, 501c3s, to sponsor a non-501c3 group to come in and present and the provision is written to have the sponsoring organization take on the response. They are responsible for the actions of the group that they are sponsoring as if it were themselves.
And I know the section because I wrote it's Roman numeral VB8. And before I was uncomfortable with the wording, and this probably given the revision, I am comfortable with sponsorship given the text that appears. Yeah. So section Roman numeral VB8.
I guess my issue is our very, very limited definition of a community organization, not the 501c3, but that it's 501c3 just in the Bethlehem Central School District. Is that correct?
Right. I mean, so there's two separate questions there, right?
Yeah.
So when we're dealing with a limited community resource, my librarian heart wants to say that it should be available to everybody in the entire world under equal access, right? When you have a limited resource that is in demand, I think you look for what are the neutral ways that you as a board or we as a library can restrict use of the space. And one of those ways is by restricting it to people who are more closely tied, live in the district of the library, right? I think how you choose to define what it means, a 501c3 organization that deals in the town, and you can see in all of the school districts, there are a lot of somersaults to try to define this thing. So it's
so something to your concern, Laura, an example that Jeff gave that we spoke about when we were working with staff concerns on this is that lots of national 501c3s likely have an address somewhere in an affiliated address somewhere in the Bethlehem School District. So for example, the Girl Scouts have a national 501c3. Their national organization holds a 501c3. And there are plenty of troops that are affiliated with them that would fall under that umbrella with an address here in Bethlehem. So that, in speaking with Jeff, that it's not as hyper local as it seems. It has a national scope. But what does everyone think of that limitation on the definition of 501c3, that they have to have a Bethlehem area or a Bethlehem school district address?
I mean, how many groups is that? I forget the Girl Scouts and the Boy Scouts, but how many nonprofits have a Bethlehem Central School District address? I don't know. It feels, I looked at, a couple of other policies. It seems like, you could give priority, but maybe have some greater expansion. I just keep thinking we are, I know there's a City of Albany library system. I know they have their libraries, but so many of us have City of Albany connections, right? And think about the organizations there, the needs there. It just feels like an equity issue. And how can we be, I understand wanting to serve our community first and foremost, but I kind of err on the broader definition of community. And if there's a way for us to just think about, like, who are we excluding? That's what I'm concerned about, is who are we excluding?
Well, it sounds like we have two questions here, really. Who are we including and who are we excluding? So I guess I think that this is a good topic for the next round of comments is going to draft language tonight, but for within the next week to send comments on how you might change the wording of this to make it more inclusive. But I also think that maybe policy committee can take on, and I'm not sure if we can do this, but to take on a task of who is really included in that definition. And we welcome your input on who you think would be excluded from that definition. So who's included, who's excluded, and based on both any information that we're able to give you or any information that you find yourself, how would you change the wording of this? How would you change that definition of community organization? I think that we're landing on the idea that it would be a 501c3. I think we're sticking with that, but any qualifiers, right now it has the qualifier of the address. Does there need to be a different qualifier? Do we want to say any 501c3? Where does the board want to go on this?
Yeah, so I think comments back.
Yep.
I mean, so I think you sort of said this, but so could we just change it to say something like priority is always given to local 501c3s?
Yeah, that was Laura's suggestion.
With the possibility of.
Well, that's
I like it just from a practical standpoint. It's difficult for us to do because, and believe me, if you're booking it 6 months in advance and so it's available, you book the room. How do the software cannot accommodate, okay, this one's marked as a not out of the area. So it's a reservation. The reservation's in there. There's no mechanism for me to be able to say, okay, a group that's based in the Bethlehem School District is going to come and knock them out. I don't have a mechanism to do that. And we talked this through a little bit to see if there could there be a different time window. So it would be like 6 months in advance, the full booking, full booking rights are with the groups that meet whatever the geo criteria is. They book out 6 months and then it becomes available, with a month out or something to just other groups.
I mean, like within 2 months, all 501c3s are available. So at 6 months, it is just for.
Right.
I'm sorry, but
501c3s.
before we keep going on this road of changing it, I just wanted to say that I fully support keeping it local. We represent Bethlehem taxpayers. This is Bethlehem's library. I think it's very appropriate that we keep Bethlehem community groups as a priority. And not saying as a priority before others. I think it's okay to limit. We have a problem already with our meeting rooms and no one going to other places. We don't need to serve the world. I think we can limit this very appropriately.
I guess I was thinking about organizations that have a strong connection to Bethlehem. Like, here's my example, like grassroots givers. How many Bethlehem community is constantly, gathering donations, doing things for grassroots givers, right? They participate in the town recycling day, but my assumption is they have an Albany address. So they're of interest to Bethlehem, and many of us, I don't personally have a connection with them per se. It seems like there's a benefit, right, to the Bethlehem community to learning about the organization. I don't know, I'm just I'm just kind of brainstorming. It's like, who are we excluding that the Bethlehem community can learn from, can help, can support? That's my thing. It's serving Bethlehem residents, but by also, connecting them with additional organizations, information, that kind of a thing.
Well, honestly, that's what we'll learn from the policy. So.
But
I would recommend people just give feedback, and I also know that there are Bethlehem residents who do use that agency for themselves, having worked.
Sure.
So it's in addition to contributing, we have residents who will use some of those organizations. So I would recommend, just because I know we have other ones to go to forward, and this can come back up for re-evaluation based on the feedback is what would be my suggestion.
Yes.
As you said, like who's excluded, who's not, and consider that.
Yes. Okay, next.
Actually, I still had a concern though.
Sorry.
I'm wondering if we have any.
Address for Grassroots Giver is P.O. Box 84, Delmar, New York, 12054, based on their website.
I stand corrected.
So, but I understand the example, but I just looked it up quick.
I was just wondering, Jeff, if you happen to know how many organizations we have that are attempting to meet in the library that are not 501c3s.
No, because it's not a question I'm asking right now. So we do try to, if they give us their 501c3, we are sure when we're trying to go through this process of figuring out whether they meet the current policy and they're working in a not-for-profit way, we accept that they give us their nonprofit status. They say, oh, we're a 501c3 organization, then we're good. Then I don't need to go any further exploring them that. that way. I will try to find that answer for you. A lot of community organizations are not that organized that meet here. Again, it's a lot, the sort of your local book group, I promise you, doesn't have a 501c3 designation there.
Right, but they would be under the library card.
Correct. And that's why, I think that switch is so important. And I understand that the capacity limits of the different types of use are important too. There's a lot of interplaying things here. So if it's, if the concern is to say, that you might have a group of 40 people or 35 people that would be meeting as a non-organized group, then we can set the capacity limit for that type of use at wherever we feel it's an appropriate number for it to be. But I think it's set where it is because that's what most people are doing with those informal groups when they're not that formally structured. They're mostly just meeting here and they want to they want to craft together. They want to watch, do a movie discussion or a music discussion group, all of those, lots of various interests. I don't think anybody has any interest in making sure in trying to make it harder, trying to make it easier for them to meet here. So not put them through an insurance process and signing out the designated user. It's just because they're just less organized. The hope is it's a 501c3. They're a more organization. So
I'm sorry. Can I just double, triple clarify? So let's just say I am Grassroots Givers, who maybe is based in Albany, but I have a library card and I participate in that group. I can still sign out this room at a capacity of, we just decided 65 people with just my library card, right?
Yep.
So how many events are we really? Do you know what I mean? Like, that's a pretty big group that can just meet as just someone with a library card.
Yeah, that actually was kind of the point I was trying to get at, was that I'm not so sure this is as much of an issue as we're thinking it is.
Yeah.
No, on page 46, number 3, library space made available on the room checkout process is limited to maximum attendance of 25 people in evenings or boardroom or the community room. And minimum attendance of 4 people for the boardroom and 6 people in the community room. So you can get up to 25, but you can't get over 25.
Okay, in both for
In
life.
both.
Okay.
And if you look at page 46, number 3.
But let's say the PTA. I think the PTA can meet here, right?
sure.
Yes,
Sure.
so let's say the PTA wanted to meet here. And but you did not have a prior reservation or anything like that. You can, if it is available, you, Sarah, as the president of the PTA, can come up if it is available with your library card and say, hey, me and my 24 friends are going to meet in here. And if it's a PTA meeting, so be it. The way that you got that room is as a library card holder.
But so I was incorrect though about the capacity limits.
Yeah.
So it's 25 for that type of usage, no matter which room you're in.
Minimum of 4 for the boardroom, 6 for the community room. So you have to have 6. You
Okay,
can't just say I
minimum,
have 2 people and take them.
Okay.
Yeah, there's minimums and maximums on page.
But I do remember a previous conversation where, Jeff, you had mentioned that the bulk of the meetings that are here are smaller in nature.
Right. It's the just taking a step back from all of this. The request that everybody has is, 30 or 35 people with tables. And those are formal groups. That's the Button Club or, the Progress Club can get a little bit bigger than that, but they're still in that 55 number, unless it's a big organizational meeting. So.
While Mark was directing us to that page, I suddenly realized that under the current drafting on page 46, under community organization use, which is the room that is bigger, library space is available for reservations through the website to the 501c3 nonprofit charitable entities based in or serving the local community.
Yes, it is, but then I think it's defined.
Yeah.
I think community organization is defined as a 501c3 with an address.
That's the next
okay.
sentence. Yeah.
So I may have to make those, I don't know. Okay.
Yeah.
Right. And I think the things, you have a policy like this, we need an objective criterion.
Right.
So when I'm directing the staff to investigate this, what's the objective criteria? It's hard to say.
Right. So whatever criteria is eventually chosen has to be consistent throughout the policy. Yes, and clear. Okay, got it.
Can I add, so we haven't gotten to the 4th kind of checkout, the sort of like contract
Yeah.
checkout, right? And that's going to have a fee associated with it
Right.
to cover various costs, but it's not going to be like, we're gonna make tons of money charging these exorbitant costs. So let's just say I am one of these groups that maybe isn't fitting into these other categories. Theoretically, I could just pay my $40 or whatever it is going to turn out to be and have a meeting that way as well,
Yes.
right?
Yes, and so yes, the answer is yes, and your for-profit group that is the Scholastic book people want to come in and talk about what books they can sell us. They can do that. They can rent the room and come in and do that as a closed session. Even though they do not have a not-for-profit interest. So yes,
So the difference is those are closed.
that is the only, I just want, that is, yes. Part of the, you are paying both for the, think of it as a genuine space rental, like you
Yes,
can for the
yes.
school. You are
Right.
paying for the space, you are paying for being outside of the library's intended purposes. And you are paying for the privilege of closing the room, should you want to.
So imagine, again, to not go too far afield, imagine the piano recital. That is that, so taking this as our, what actually happens, what I actually see is that's the use, right? So book the space. It's, you can limit it to how many people you want to have in the room, have your parents of the students in here and have your recital.
But you still can't sell things.
You still can't sell things.
You can talk about selling things someplace else, but you can't sell things here. Okay,
So I feel like all those options cover the scenarios. They
there's a
really do.
lot of crossing,
Yeah.
yes. For the sake of kind of time, I guess I'm gonna blend these last 2 points in for discussion, but I think that these are probably most useful to have comments coming back. So the security provision and the crowd control provisions. The security provision was one of the most, I think, redrafted provisions in there based on comments to put in protections to ensure that it is not discriminatory. A lot of things were added, working with officials to determine if security is needed, putting it in writing, why security is needed, things like that. And then there are 2 sections that allow library staff to disperse the crowd. One is if they are crowding library areas and preventing library business from going on. The second one is if the event goes over, the library is closing, they can say time to leave. Board members expressed concern that both of these are protective, that they cannot rise to a discriminatory level. So I guess any comments are welcome on that. But again, we also welcome line item edits and how you think those can be drafted differently to be more protective.
That's page 44, line number 6. That's what it starts at.
Well, I just wanted to point out at least, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, how I'm reading or how I'm processing this. When we hear from the public that asking us to provide security is kind of a crazy thing. The idea is only if it's deemed there's a threat.
Yes.
It's not every time. It's only if there's a threat.
Yes.
There should be security.
Yes, and there is language in there that says that Jeff cannot randomly say, not that he would, but Jeff cannot randomly say, I think you're a threat. That the process to determine whether there is not a threat, a need, that security would be beneficial to the library and to the public, that you would work with officials, you would consult with the police chief, you would work with the group to determine whether that is in the best interest of everyone. And you would memorialize that and put that in place. So yes, it is certainly not, this would be a very rare instance, I think, but not unheard of.
And I provided some alternate language just in terms of broadening beyond crowd control, it's like security is more general. And then I just noted the concern that why there was have to be proof of 2 contacts. So that would be just my feedback. I think I sent it to the entire.
Yeah, I felt better about the security provision, though the crowd control I still am uncomfortable with. And although I have I've got a lot of papers in front of me and I'm like starting to question whether I have the most recent version or not, but I still have concerns that that those who wish to shut down an event will use, not dispersing as a way to immediately end an event. And I also have concerns that ending the event is going to unnecessarily escalate a situation. So I definitely will be sending edits or suggested edits for that section.
Great. Thank you.
I'm going to echo what Charmaine said. I'm not sure that I saw the need for two, but I think we just need to definitively say evidence that the arrangements have been made with a, whatever, whether it's the town police or an outside party.
And I think we got through the common bullets.
I did have,
Yeah.
I have one additional question on key considerations, section 7. It talks about any publicity mentioning the library on a social media post has to be approved by the director. Does that include the small groups, like say the garden club or the knitting club? Hey, everybody, we're meeting at the library on Thursday. They have to pass that by you first?
So I don't think it says approved. I think it says that they have to let the director know that they're going to post something.
Maybe just reconsider that, like, well.
So this is, this was another internally discussed section. So what we're trying to get at is, to the extent it can, the library would like to know what events are going to happen at the library. And one of the ways that happens is through advertising. And sometimes events at the library are advertised and we find out about it through third parties. So, which does not always benefit us. We don't have time to prepare certain things. So that provision is not written to gain approval of advertising. It's to really just give the library a heads up when you are advertising.
And I think it's important. Mechanically, we talked about this, like mechanically, how does that actually work for me / the staff? We will find out, or they find out. I do think it's important that sort of in that number 7, that it's up on the screen now. So we say it's important, and I think there's always some language in our policy that said this, but I think they're very explicit about the fact that since programs neither sponsored nor affiliated with the Bethlehem Public Library. I think there's been a lot of confusion about that exact thing. For a lot of people that we're in partnership, or we are somehow doing anything, from the library's perspective, from my perspective, we provide a room. Here's your room. Enjoy it. That's that room is for your use. It is not in partnership or affiliated with the library. This is the community resource that we have available. It's not the library's job to, and there is a lot of confusion about this. It's not the library's job to advertise or to a group or its membership. That's not the role that we play here. We are a vessel. We've got this thing that is, when we're not using it, it's available to the community. Come in and use the room. And so I think it's important that language be included when people are advertising about the location, because there is a lot of confusion. But we saw that, and some people, people were sending us say, well, here's a flyover program that happened in 2018 that didn't say anything like this, and that this was available. Well, we didn't have a chance to have said anything like that or confirm that information was in that press. So, I echo the concerns about our ability to mechanically do that, but that said, I think there is an interest in knowing that the language that is important, that important language is put into any advertising about an event that's taking place here.
So yes, a knitting group would have to let you know ahead. It might be overkill.
I just overwhelming. I get it.
Yeah.
We can think on it and then come back in the next meeting and say, yeah.
But some of those organizations usually have affiliated groups that they're advertising to. They're not like publicly advertising. So they're, a closed Facebook group or whatever it is. So I think there is some wiggle room there that you can kind of slide into.
Right, so what you're saying is if you had a closed email list, like if you have a book
Right.
group and you're just gonna email a
Right.
closed list, that doesn't have to be approved. But if you're gonna put it out publicly, and
Right.
it's like this is what's happening, then.
Right, and sometimes there's
Yeah,
a
you
press
have to-
release, press release.
Careful on the language because it says social media posts on a group page.
Yeah, so if
So-
on an open, maybe we add an open
Yeah.
page. So if you're gonna throw that on the Bethlehem Buy Nothing page,
Right.
we'd like. Let us know.
Right.
If you're going to kind of put it on,
Garden Club closed group.
yeah.
Right.
Actually, Buy Nothing might be a closed group, so I take them back. Yeah, but
That's a good one. We should think about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just wanted to, are we done with that one? Or do you're still thinking about it? Okay, so the one other thing I flagged in my comments was the key considerations. Roman numeral 3 and 2, the idea of neutral criteria to qualify for the use of the library. I'll think more on that because it's the director or their designee is responsible to determine if a proposed user meets those requirements. I think those have to be, we have to be more specific on what's a neutral, right? I don't understand what that.
so I will just preview for you that is language that was given to us verbatim from our attorney.
Mhm, yeah.
So.
When I reread it this time, I'm like, what does that even mean? And I think people could come to the library with appeals or questions about what does neutral, I mean, and does that mean you can't have anyone talk about anything in the world that's
Controversial.
controversial, like what's prohibited speech, what's controversial, what's gonna, so I think the word neutral there is, we can maybe work with the attorney, is, for me, when I reread it this time, it was problematic.
Okay.
Or it has to be flushed out more or something, there is, what is a neutral criteria, does that mean living in Bethlehem and a Bethlehem address, that I can get?
I think we might be misconstruing that. I think that the library is deciding whether someone is a user based on a neutral criteria, not whether the content of what you're presenting is a neutral
I
criteria.
understand, so I would say what it is.
Like, well,
Examples, examples like Bethlehem address, or just because I think the word neutral could be a trigger point for people.
you like objective criteria, is that?
That's probably better, yeah, I think at my notes, I said the neutral is the wrong word, it's just gonna. Or maybe say, for example.
Right, yeah, I get what you're saying. You're thinking like the content of the meeting has to be neutral.
Right.
That's not what this is saying. It's we are using objective criterion that reduces the director's discretion, which is important.
Yeah.
That we are using
Non-discretionary.
non-discretionary,
Yeah,
non-discriminatory.
and then given a couple of examples, because I think it could be a trigger point.
Okay, fair enough.
Okay, I think our last point is, I think almost everyone raised whether allowing people one reservation per month under community organizations, facility use, and I think there was those two, right? Whether one reservation enough a month is too little.
Right, so this exists now, so we have this problem already. So the way we handle this now is that groups that are booking the room get one reservation a month. When we get to within 1 month of the date of the reservation, groups can book additional rooms. So the switch for this, I think, is the fact that the group's going to have multiple people. So if the group books the room, they've got one reservation a month. Then if they want to have another meeting, they can just check the room out. And it tends to be, so for instance, the Progress Club will come in, they have their large meeting, right? They're the sort of organizational meeting, and then the board of the Progress Club wants to get together and have another meeting. This actually makes it easier because they could just check the room out, just put a reservation in under room checkout. One of those board members could just check the room out under that room reservation. So
you're thinking one's sufficient.
I do, because we have the switch of that room checkout process, which we don't have right now. So we created the opening switch is that, well, once you get within a month, we're saying, okay, once you're within a month of the date, everybody's had their crack. Everybody's had 6 months or 5 months to take their look at the room, try to make a room reservation. And now we're past that date. Anything that's open, you want to book the room, knock yourself out. We'd rather have the rooms used than not used. I think the room checkout switch, which is those extra meetings every month, could just be handled on a room checkout. I think it would just eliminate completely the need to have that. I wouldn't support. I don't think a good idea would be having because we're interested in equitable, 2 or 3 or 12. I don't think that's an equitable use of the library resources, because there are people who are aware and know how to book the rooms, and you could easily have if you set it at 12, you could have people come in and book 12 times in a month, and that would make the room very much not available to others.
I still feel like I need clarification on this.
Okay.
So in an individual checkout situation, so I'm going to check out the room with my card.
Yep.
And I can only do it once a month.
Yep.
But I am leading the lip sync group for my one kid, and I'm leading the lip sync group for my other kid. And I'm also chairing the PTA committee for the Halloween fest. And all of those things need to have meetings. So it's in essence 3 different groups, but because it's like an individual checkout, I can only check it out once unless I'm last minute. Is that true?
Or else you come in like literally the day of and the room happens to be open and you and you can come in here. That said, there are probably other folks in your group that can book the room.
I say the other lip sync parents.
I mean, if we really opened up the room checkout to, I mean, it would be an interesting experiment. If we really opened up the room checkout to people and said 5 a month, I think you would have, I think you'd have a lot of complaints. Because the room would just fill. It would fill very quickly. I think a lot of people wouldn't have access to the rooms.
Is there room somewhere between 1 and 5? Like, are we willing to experiment with 2?
You guys, the board. I mean, it's.
I think regardless of what we do, whether we change it or not, the re-education of the users is significant.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And I would kind of go with less before you go with more, but that's me.
I don't feel super passionate about it either way. I wouldn't advocate for anything more than 2 probably in reality.
Okay.
But if 1 is what we've been doing, I'm fine with sticking with that and seeing what happens. I just feel like there is a core group of people who do a lot of things.
Right. Yeah, there's no magic to 1. There's no magic to that number.
But I think it's reasonable to say, can we monitor it? And if it seems like people are getting it and there's still space available, maybe you revisit it and say 2's maybe doable.
Hey, let us know.
I just want to talk about it. I'm okay keeping it at 1 and seeing what happens.
Stuff meeting room.
I think
Right, so the last bullet I put down there, which is on a bullet actually, but it's implementation timeline and cost of room meeting. So those are, as we get closer to a final policy, those are very important issues. I would also add the re-education of the public, or the education of the public on the new policy. So that kind of all goes together. I think we need to think about like the timing of all this. And what we need I would need from the staff about how much time do you need, lead time do you need before you flip a switch on a new policy.
And I've been thinking about this a lot too, and I think the kind of the way we made modifications to the policy several times recently. So I think the way you do it is you have a policy and you say, okay, now for the next 6 months, you're going to have a mix of these different uses, and you're saying, okay, the rooms that are already booked, you've already got those. Those were booked under the existing policy, and we know what those are because we know what date they were initiated. And then from that date forward, whether it's next week or 6 months from now, that would be booked under the new policy. I think that gives you that 6 month switchover implementation, especially as the groups that are looking, the furthest out that they want to put 6 months out. That there's going to be a lot of education, and I'm imagining there's going to be, as that room checkout people become more aware of that, and the sort of ease of that process. I think that might pick up as we get closer to the whatever time people want to use the room.
Right, so people should think about that. There's also a training piece in here. There's also, I think we should talk about the rental rates. So the community knows that we're not gonna charge $10,000 a room or something, we have the reasonable rates. I mean, been looking at the school district rates, I think are high, frankly, but that might be for the community, might look at that as a guide.
Well, it's a very analogous organization with a very analogous staff costs to implementing a room, maintenance costs, all of those things. So I think it's likely, I wasn't around when those policies were formed, but it's likely based on the staff time and staff cost implementation. Seems like a decent place to begin a conversation.
Was that amount? I don't know what amount we're even.
Handbook. We can.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't, off the top of my head, I don't know. It seemed high to me, but.
And you're saying rates, but it would only be a rate.
Right. Yeah.
So,
well, there's a couple different things here, like it's a $50 service fee for late, and there's that kind of thing. But what I'm more concerned about is the rental rate for the room. Like, that's a new thing we're introducing.
so thank you. I'm sorry, Laura.
Well, I was just gonna say, is the school district high because they're not there on the weekends, for example, whereas we're open on the weekends? I haven't looked at it either, but that was just one possible thought.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Caroline.
Oh, sorry. Everyone, very constructive. Thank you. I think we can work all of this in, but I don't want everyone to be limited to comments tonight. If you can, within the next week, so by next Monday, if you can send in comments using the same chart that we've used before on any of these issues and anything else that you see in the policy. And although we're still getting a little ahead of where we are, the cost, what you think of as a reasonable cost, things like that. Because I think what we're hoping to do is after this is within a week, then turn another draft of this which will be significantly less edits than what you saw this round. I don't think there'll be any significant restructuring this round. I think this will just be more wordsmithing. And get this out to you with plenty of time before the June 10th board meeting. And hopefully at that point, we're pretty close to potentially voting on the policy itself, if not while still working on the actual implementation of it.
Sure, and I did make some recommendations on just moving things too, so structurally it may.
The only other area that wasn't on this list that I had some concerns about were some of the provisions in terms of length of times for violations in some cases. And just my initial reaction was they seem pretty lengthy, or maximally lengthy. Maybe you would go less, but so I will be sending some of those in.
Yeah, we try to draft up tos, but I understand that they're pretty long.
And two, I just wanted to point out for the public that might be listening in that we are changing this policy and addressing these concerns because of the last year of controversial meetings. It's not happening in a vacuum. It's a reaction to what has happened, and hopefully these policy changes make the library more open to everyone.
I think how we frame that is it's an opportunity to revisit what we had. So as opposed to saying, I think this was in the minutes actually. It's not a problem to be fixed. It was an opportunity to take advantage of. I think that's what we said on the merits, yeah.
Yeah, I just want to thank everyone for the work on this because it's been going on a long time and people really got into it, so it's helpful. So we'll keep turning around. Hopefully, we do a meeting, or if we do a special meeting, We'll be ready to go.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, thanks Caroline too for all of this. Okay, we're gonna move on to the next agenda item, which is animals in the library policy, first read, page 52.
So this was, it's not a, go ahead. Yeah.
No, I was gonna say the next two are just the policy committee worked on some existing policies and some wordsmithing. I don't know, you would say specifically about some of the other changes, but
Okay, yeah, we're,
past the policy committee.
My first question is, were there changes? And if so, where are the changes? Like, I don't see what was old and what's new.
yeah, I'll send you a red line.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think that's important to have from the get-go.
I think with the animals one, it was some updating of language. To be more consistent with modern language around particularly referencing people. Trying to think what else was there much else than that? Who was on the committee? You were in the committee, I think it was more.
No, it wasn't
I don't think
much,
there was
but a
that
red line would be-
Yeah,
a red
red
line
line
would be good. Yeah. Which is the red line.
I think there's more on the bulletin board.
Yes. Okay, so people take a look at that, it's first read, hopefully the public can take a look at it as well and. there's no-
Oh, are we still on the animal?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, just,
Oh,
we can talk about it now, or we can.
no,
They were good, okay. So we'll send out a red line on that, and then the next one for the, yeah, it's the bulletin board policy on page 53.
same question.
Right. Yeah.
Got it.
red
I
line.
don't know what has changed. So it's hard to have a first read. Oh, like, if you could send the red line, that'd be great.
I will.
Yeah. We can post a red line too, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll post it as well.
I think with bulletin board, it was mostly consistency with language and some wordsmithing. And there was one area that Jeff had raised for the board, which for some reason escapes me at the moment.
It's the promotion, the charitable promotion, given the
Oh,
solicitation
right.
policy.
Lawn mowing and versus.
Well, not the
Right,
one,
that,
yes.
right, that versus the groups that could, you're gonna.
Chicken barbecue.
Chicken barbecue.
Right, and I think we've been borrowing the language from the meeting room policy, so it's 501c3 designations or charities registered in New York.
So does
But
that,
I was gonna say, but I know this one says within the towns of Bethlehem and New Scotland. So just interesting, I noticed that here. And I know it's not the same thing, meeting room space versus bulletin board space, but just something to note.
Yeah.
so does this, then, and I can't even remember if these used to be on the bulletin board, but babysitting jobs,
This-
dog walking.
Yep, they're not
Oh,
allowed
Lord.
under this version of the policy, right?
Okay, well, like, I hear they're not allowed, but
Yeah.
were they up on the bulletin board in the past?
We've definitely had that sort of thing on the board.
Right, because the policy originally, if I remember correctly, said you couldn't sell things on the library grounds. And that's not what a babysitter or dog walker is doing. They're just advertising. It's not selling on library grounds, which is a different thing.
That's the
selling
exact discussion we
services.
had in the policy committee.
Yeah.
Yeah, a difference of opinion on that. I think that's a good discussion to have, actually. And where are the lines on that? So if I want to offer tutoring, for example, and I put up a sign that says I'm offering tutoring. I don't know what the going rate is, but X dollars number an hour for social studies tutoring or whatever. Is that okay or not okay?
Right. Tutoring is definitely a touchy subject because
Right.
tutors are being paid and that's happening.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
then the question is if my kid or someone wants to offer lawn mowing service and wants to advertise in the library as a community resource. You know, you can go either way in that. I mean, I could go either way in that. but
So if you had this-
policy basically says you can't do that.
So you had the discussion in the policy committee and decided against the babysitting, dog walking,
Right.
lawn mowing.
I think it says available for non-commercial announcements, and so we thought lawn mowing and dog is commercial announcement.
Okay. I do know we've had this discussion a few times in the past and I've raised it several times.
Yeah,
I think especially considering that the town has the youth employment services that this library focuses a lot on youth services. I'm disappointed that we're limiting in that way, and that kids looking to work in that way are not able to post their information.
It's whether that's an acceptable use of a government resource. Tax paid, I mean, a bulletin board, we don't pay a lot, but it's a tax supported, tax funded thing. Right, our bulletin board is in a tax funded business. Is it acceptable for us to use that? Is it acceptable for people to advertise their for profit? I mean, even if it's lightly for profit, like a lawn mowing service or Pepsi, either way, is it okay to use the resources of the library for that purpose?
Although I assume the town
Yeah, I was just
hall
gonna
is
say.
also,
Do they allow?
well, they have an entire department.
No, but would they allow you to walk up?
Oh, to have the
Use
bulletin
that.
board over there.
Looks like somebody.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's the kind of the issue.
Right. It's not a value judgment in any way, shape, or form. It's is that an acceptable use of our resource?
So it sounds like red line copies go out.
Yep.
And then even if it's going up for a second read, doesn't have to be voted on. It just means
No.
another discussion. And then if there's more discussion needed, it gets bumped to the following.
Yeah.
Could I just, I'm sorry, follow-up question, government agencies, if that was town hall and youth employment services wants to put up a flyer saying, you know, we have all these opportunities for kids and also for, you know, community members to use these services, that would be okay.
Right. The town hall could advertise, you know, so if senior services said, hey, we've got, I mean, anything that if youth employment service said, we've got opportunities, contact the youth employment service.
Yeah.
Fine. Right. That's government funded.
All right. Okay, thanks.
Okay, any other questions or comments on that? You'll take a look at that for the next meeting as well. The next item is the building project update.
Okay. Wow. Okay. I think most of that.
Short update on the.
Short
building
update.
project.
Project Week, things continue apace. You've correctly identified that the seeker is the next hard deadline that we're up against, and we need to get moving on that. So that's where we are. Judy was here tonight, so that's great. I think having the chief election inspector is very helpful to us. We're ready to move forward on that. Lots of stuff from Suzanne, which you're all appraised of. Lots of more public meetings and good questions. You've all got the one pager about the project. So if you want to interact with members of the public, I stand ready if you let me know where we might want to go. I've got an appointment to speak to the Progress Club at their meeting in October, which is after the vote. So that won't be, they'll be the first people to be updated about the results of the vote. But so I'm going to go speak to them. That's I think that's mostly it, unless you've got questions for me.
Any questions, comments on the building project update? Other old business? Future business.
That's you, Charmaine.
Oh, I know. I was looking to see if there was a slide. Just as the mentioned before, my spouse and I anticipate moving to Massachusetts. And so at the next meeting, I will probably discuss this, but I think I just submitted a letter with a date to Jeff, and that will be my resignation. And that's where the one seat that's up for election.
Yep.
It comes from. So thank you.
Okay, any other future business? Any public participation? Okay, we got an executive session, so I would need a motion. To enter executive session to discuss matters that involve proposed pending or current litigation.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor, signify by saying yes, raise your hand, okay. That motion is carried. So we'll move to executive session.